the same issues. So yeah, you'd have legal fees, you'd have the filing fees. Each new employer has to file the petition and pay the fees. Yes?
About the question he just mentioned, will we be put into the cap again?
No, that's a great question. Once you're allocated to the cap, then you have secured your number, so you don't need a new number. So if you work for a private sector employer this year and you're allocated to the H-1B cap, when you go to the next employer, the cap does not apply. One exception, if you work for a university, for example, you're not subject to the cap. Then if you want to move to the private sector, you would be subject to the cap when you make that transition. Yes?
So suppose I graduate and I don't have a job offer. Do I have to start the OPT, apply for the OPT? Or you apply for the OPT once you get a job offer? Somebody clear.
Well, the timing of, that's really a good question for your international student office. And typically, ideally, you want to have the OPT coincide roughly with when you start the job. But there are limits on how far out you can apply for OPT. Because once the International Student Office completes your program, so if you graduate and then you complete your program, you have a certain time frame within which you have to apply for OPT and then also make it effective.
What is this time frame?
Well, you need to talk to the International Student Office about that. Because they're the ones who handle that F1 OPT process. It's roughly a couple months. You don't have a lot of time.
So can you be on OPT without having a job and just still looking for jobs?
Yeah, that's another. There's a time limit depending upon where you are in the process. You can have a period of unemployment, but there's a cap on how long. It can't go on forever.
Do you know how big is that period?
No, I want to say it's roughly a couple months, but again, talk to your international student office. Yes? Some employers will have on their website or in the advertisement, must have authorization to work, no H-1B sponsorship. I've only seen that in a few cases. It's really something that is employer specific. If you don't find that information up front, then ask. That's something that's a legitimate question to ask. Do you sponsor H-1B petitions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned that there's a cap for private sector H-1B applications. I take it there isn't a cap if you're applying for public sector like our university.
That's right. Yeah, and when I say private-public, it's because you could be working for, a public interest organization. But yeah, generally, if it's XYZ company, then the cap will apply. If it's a university or, for example, the Children's Hospital, there might be a research institute. There's also a research institute at Nationwide Children's Hospital. All those organizations are not subject to the cap.
Sorry, one follow-up question. If you do get an H-1B, how soon after getting that start applying for the green card?
The two are independent. You don't have to have H-1B status to apply for a green card. Most people, that's usually how it happens. Because you graduate, you join a company, they want to give it a little bit of time, and then you start the green card process, but it can happen at any time.
Is there a minimum amount of time that you get before applying?
No, there's no minimum. The one thing that I usually, from a timeline standpoint, that I recommend is once you start your second 3-year period of H-1B status, if you have not started pursuing the green card, at that time you want to be thinking about it. Because you want to make sure you reach the milestone so that you can continue to extend your H-1B status. You don't want to wait until 5.5 years into H-1B status to pursue a green card. Good question.
So that means we can start to pursue the green card as early as possible, as long as the employer agrees.
That's the second part of that was very important. You can start applying for a green card in the employment context as soon as the employer is prepared. Yes. Yes.
In some countries, you can apply for residency if you live there for over 7 years. And does that apply to the United States?
Now, the 4 ways I mentioned, the employment, family, political asylum, lottery, that's it. There's another way that I didn't mention, but if you have the United States Congress sponsor you for a private bill, you can get a green card that way. But that takes the majority of the House, majority of the Senate, and the President has to sign it. If you have that kind of clout, go for it. Yes.
In what conditions the green card can be revoked?
Well, the green card could be revoked. One, if it was procured through fraud. If the employer committed fraud in the process, that could be grounds.
If the employer returns to home country for 1 year or more than...
Well, that's a separate question. That's one way is fraud. The other way is if somebody gets a green card and then leaves the United States for a lengthy period of time, the green card could be considered abandoned. The status could be abandoned.
It's not related with the job itself, right? If you lose the job...
No, if you get a green card based upon XYZ company, and then a week later or 2 weeks later, or 2 months or 2 years later, you get terminated or there's a layoff, you keep the green card. You're not going to lose your green card because you lost your job. Yes?
Say a company files my even before I graduate and I have like 1 quarter of studies and I get my H-1 approved. So would I be able to complete my last quarter and then...
Yeah, you can pursue studies while in H-1B status. So you could...
limits on number of credits I can take?
Depends on how much time you have. If you want to, you can work part-time in H-1B status, or you can work full-time in H-1B status and go to school part-time. But you could graduate with for example, a master's degree and then start working. And then if you wanted to pursue a second master's degree part-time, you can do that in the evenings while you're working in H-1B status. Sure.
But there's no hard limit on number of credits I can take?
No, there's no limit on the number of credits you can take. No. Take one more question and we'll wrap up. Yes? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a good question. Did everybody hear the question about once you get the change of status from F1, for example, to H-1B, and then you go to the U.S. consulate to get the H-1B visa to come back to the United States, is there a guarantee that you'll get the visa? The short answer is no. The long answer is that in most cases you will. The reasons that you would not get the visa would be if there's something unusual about the job, if the employer maybe revokes the petition or something in the meantime, or if you have some kind of criminal background. And that's something I'm sure nobody here has any criminal background. But that's something that if there is any, and basically anything beyond a minor traffic ticket is something that needs to be evaluated before somebody leaves the country to apply for a visa. Because in some cases there are certain crimes that can prevent individuals from getting an H-1B visa. But in most cases, if the H-1B petition has been approved, you have your documents, and you go to the consulate, it's just a matter of waiting. Some consulates you'll get the visa in a couple of days, some it takes a couple of months to get an appointment, but in most cases it's okay. So just to kind of wrap up, thank you again for coming. When you're looking for jobs, keep in mind that the job has to require a degree. Focus on what the job requires. Make sure that you have a relevant degree. And then as you're pursuing employment with companies, be upfront about the need for sponsorship and then ask a lot of questions. And good luck. But again, thanks for coming very much.
Hey, John, the feedback forms, can you have them bring them up? Microphone.
Yes, for those of us participating